G'day guys, I'm Adam, the Mini Wall Painter, and happy Movember. Recently I've been inspired by this model, painted by Fingers RFW, and if you want to find out how I took that inspiration and turned it into something of my own, then I'll catch you after the intro. Before we get started, I'd just like to make 2 points. Point number 1, if you've not heard yet, I'm hosting a painting competition, and if you want to find out all the rules and the prizes that are involved, stick around to the end of the video. Point number 2, this video is sponsored by We Print Miniatures. We Print Miniatures provides a vast range of models 3D printed, ready to go for you guys to paint. They've also been nice enough to provide me with the Demon that's featured in this tutorial. Not only this, but they've also offered discount codes up from 10%, ranged up to 20% if you're a patron, for all their range of models, whether they've already on offer or not. So after this video, click on the link in the description box below and that'll send you to their site where you can have a look. After all, the painting competition is Dungeons and Dragons themed. They're offering 10% discount on their entire range, which majority of them already have offers on them. So it's a bit of a no-brainer. Head over there, find yourself a model and get stuck into this painting competition. Now, what I want to get covered in this video is how I painted the wings to the Demon of mine. Now, the wings are a great place to start things off because they're flat, they're large, and they're a great opportunity to practice all your blending techniques, be it wet blending, feathering, or glazing. So the idea that I have for this model, after taking this ball of inspiration that I gained from Fingers' model, is when I looked at his model, I don't know if this was the effect he was achieving himself or if he was actually going for something different, but what I personally took from the image of his model was the idea of trying out a OSL effect of moonlight. Now, most of the time, we tend to imagine that our model's environment is from the sun, and I've seen many models painted by great painters, such as Fingers, and the model, in fact, the environment is dark. It's dark and the moon's out, it's strong, and you've got this twilight vibe to it. And you've got the contrast between the warmth, the natural warmth tones of whatever the model is wearing, or his skin in this case, the red demon skin. And it's going to contrast nicely with that blue twilight sort of OSL effect. And this is the sort of thing I had in mind to go for. One last thing as well before we move on is, if you enjoy my work and you want to keep up to date at all times, I'm continuously posting on Instagram, whether it's photos or stories. I'm always showing off what I'm painting, what I've got coming up next. So yeah, if you want to find me, it's at miniwall_painter. Now, how about we get on with some painting? Not again. Now, recently I've taken a shine to palette preparation. Palette preparation, I find recently, is a key to the fluent process of painting, because if you haven't got all the paints you need there and then in front of you, I think you're going to have a much more difficult time chasing after the effects you want. My advice to you is get your wet palette out, draw out all the paints you're going to be using for that particular area and lay them out onto your palette, good to go. So what I wanted for this model was vibrant red skin and a dusty blue, vibrant blue tone coming from above. if that's possible. Dusty blue, vibrant, and completely different things, but yeah. So after investing a lot of time and paint, I decided to go with deep red from scale 75 and dried bark for my red tones, and the Fang and Night Lord's blue from Citadel for my blue tones. The Fang offered that dusty blue tone that I was after, and Night Lord's blue, even though it's dark, it's still quite strong in pigment for the blue vibrant tone I was going for as well. Mix them together, I got both properties from each paint, and yeah, I found the blue I was after. Now, after a while playing with these tones on the model and spending a lot of time working out how I wanted this wing to look, this is what I came up with. Overall, I was chuffed to bits with how the tones turned out. I've got the blues were exactly how I wanted them, and the reds are nice and vibrant, and they all come together quite nicely. So once I was happy with all the tones that I had laid down on my palette, it was time to put paint to mini. To begin with, I had to establish where I wanted my blue tones to be in comparison to my red tones. So to begin with, I started off with a very subtle mixture between my blue and red tones to then start picking out where I wanted the wings to be highlighted. You know, that's going to be catching the reflection from the moon above. Once I've finally gotten these tones established, it was just then a case of blending these two tones together so I have a nice smooth transition to build up my highlights for each tone. Because the wings are so large and flat like I mentioned earlier, this was a perfect opportunity to practice a little bit of wet blending, which is a case of slapping on one layer of tone, and then before it has a chance to dry, get the second tone on your brush, layer that on where it needs to be, and then slowly weave in both tones together to try and mix and muddle those two pigments so that you get that nice smooth blended transition. Once I was finally happy with where I'd placed these two tones on the wings, it was then time to do a little bit of recess shading. I started off with the red and I mixed a little bit more dried bark into my deep red than before for its base tone, and with a little bit more water than usual, load your brush up and just use the tip of your brush to sort of lead the pigment into the recess that is sort of sculpted in the wing to help bring, you know, the deeper parts of those wings out that little bit more. So when you do come to placing down your highlights, they have something to contrast nicely against, which will make them stand out even further. And then after I completed the shading of the red tones, I did exactly the same thing to the blue tones. Using some of the reddy brown tones that I use for shading the red areas, mixed in with the blues, it'll help tie in those two areas together a little bit more. Once I was happy with all the shading, it was then a case of now highlighting, and I started things off with the blue tones with a 2-to-1 mix of my blue mixture that I made with the Fang and Night Lord's blue, along with the deep red. And with this, I watered it down to a nice glazing consistency to then smoothen out those highlights onto the wings, because at the end of the day, when it comes to painting skin, you don't want harsh transitions in your highlights. You want them to be nice and smooth, and glazing is a great technique for this. Once I was happy with the blue highlights, I then moved on to the red tones with a 2-to-1 mix of deep red and dried bark. And I used this in the same way as my blue tones with a nice glaze consistency, applying it to all the areas I felt required a bit of a highlight. Once I was happy with all my highlights, as I gradually went through my tones on my wet palette, it was then a case of using the pure tone for each highlight with the Fang and the Night Lords for the blue areas, and then deep red on its own for the red areas. Only this time, rather than a glaze, I attempted to apply some texture to the wings by painting nice thin edge highlights to all of the raised surfaces in the sculpt that you can just barely make out. Doing this will bring contrasting texture to the model, as you'll have the nice but yet rough, smooth skin, a bit contradicting there, against the cold, polished, reflective, non-metallic gold details which I'll paint at a later date. Once I was finally happy with the overall look of the highlights and I've finished playing around with my palette, wet blending, smoothing all these glazing transitions out, it was then a case of tying then again the two tones together by mixing in my pure blood red and blue mix together in order to create the bridge between the two tones on the model. On completion of this stage and looking at the overall finish of the model, I didn't feel like it was quite finished. I wanted to take these highlights a little bit further. So what I did from here on is I gave my little wet palette another look and played around with some more tones to work out where to take these highlights. My first thought was perhaps involving some of the tones that I'm going to introduce onto my non-metallic metal gold effect at a later date. At the time, the paints I was going to use for this was Ungor Flesh as one of the highlights. Ungor Flesh is a browny, beigey, yellowy, creamy tone, so not really any good right now for what we want. So to dull it down a little bit, I wanted to desaturate it. So I mixed in some Citadel Administratum Grey to help bring back that sort of, shall we say, pastel sort of tone I was after. I wanted it to look quite chalky. And then from then, once I was happy with what I'd achieved with that mixture, I then mixed in some of my blue tones that I've been using before, the Fang and Night Lords mix. And then, yeah, I started glazing in my highlights. While you're all just watching some epic mini painting action going on, I just want to do a shout out to all my new patrons: Guy Pascoe, Fallstar, Mazik, Occult Media, Mark McHugh, Yuska Studio, and Eric Fabella. Cheers guys for your support, I really do appreciate it. Then to finally finish off these wings, I then blended these two tones again together. Going back to my palette, I mixed together these two highlights that I developed for my reds and my blues and applied it to the model in order to bring the smooth transition to all of those tones together and to really harmonize the entirety of the wings. With the wings now finished, it was then to move on to the horns. I'll give you a quick little brief on how I painted the horns. There's not much to see on the process of painting them. It was a case of basing them with Ushanti bone and then mixing Ushanti bone in with dry bark, glazing through the tones to then bring the tips to a nice dark brown, and then to finish them off on the tips of each horn, I then mixed in some Abaddon black into dry bark just to finish that off. And then that was the horns completed. And then to tie in the horns with the OSL blue effect we've got going on naturally with the wings as well, it was a case of taking that blue mixture that I've made with the Fang and Night Lords blue, mixing a little bit of my Ushanti bone and dry bark mix just to sort of model those two tones so you've got a bit of both on your brush. And then I just glazed in very, very thinly over the tops of each horn where the moonlight was going to naturally catch. And I kept applying this tint to those horns until I was happy with the opacity of the OSL effect. And that was the horns completed. With those horns finished, that's the wings pretty much completed, and the same to this tutorial. So what I'll do now is I'll show you a little showcase of what the model looks now fully completed. I'll catch you at the end. And that's a wrap. I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial, guys. I really enjoyed painting this model. You know me by now, I love experimenting with different colours and trying to create different effects to the model. We've got an awesome blue moonlight effect coming down from above. We've got a really cool green glow coming from underneath. And in the middle, we've got a bit of texture for the non-metallic golds. If you want to learn how I painted the non-metallic gold details to this model, or the green OSL effect that comes from the base underneath, you'll be able to find those on Patreon, which I've got a link to in the description box below. Patreon is a great way for you to support the channel, and all earnings that I make will go straight back into the hobby so I can keep pumping these tutorials for you guys with a vast variety of models that you would like to see. Now let's talk painting competition. Now I've been wanting to do a painting competition for ages. So what this painting competition is about is a Dungeons and Dragons themed model painted to your best standard that you can get. I'll be judging it, I'll be looking for all the effects and techniques that you can apply to make this mini look amazing. And if you can keep the price of the model under £40, that'll keep this more of a fair competition for everybody else that haven't got such deep pockets for this competition. And to top it off, We Print Miniatures have offered us a 10% discount on their entire range of models, whether they're already reduced or not. If you want the 10% discount code, you'll find it in the description box below. And if you're a patron, there's also a 20% discount code. One more thing to mention, when you finally get your new mini, before you start putting paint on it, get a photo of it on your Instagram feed with the hashtag MWP D&D Painting Comp. And that'll sort of initiate your spot in the painting competition so I can start to see the sort of numbers that we've got coming through. And then feel free to post as many work in progress photos as you want using that hashtag so we can all see how everyone's getting on. Furthermore, once you finally finish painting your mini, please post another picture on that hashtag with the word finalised in the comments. That way I can start seeing who's finished and start judging and weighing things up to make things a lot smoother and quicker towards the end. The deadline for this painting competition is the 17th of December. That said, there is plenty of flexibility in this, so if you need those extra few days just to squeeze in those final details, let me know and I will announce that there'll be an extra week added on should there need to be. Other than that, good luck with the painting competition, guys. I can't wait to see what you do. Thanks for watching, guys. I really appreciate your time and I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Don't be shy to mix those paints and I'll catch you later. Ta-ra!